efforts are and what the progress is with respect to that. And as you know, because of the rightfully appropriate legal process we have to go through, it takes 6 years to actually be able to demo a building. So we also want people to understand that we follow the law, we give appropriate notice, but we will follow through. And the idea with this is maybe if we shine a light on it, things will change faster than 6 years. And so another item on this that I want to mention is it's really just another tool in our tool belt for the various programs we have, including the ADAPT program, which is for also various serious situations like this one. And so we're going to talk more about the details on this with our Director of Planning, Brendan Williams, but I do want to mention, folks, the Problem Properties Program website is available now at cabq.gov/planning. And you just click on Codes, Regulation, and Enforcement, and you'll see the link where there's pictures and so forth and details on all of these problem properties. So with that, let me hand it over to our Director of Planning, Brendan Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Brendan Williams, B-R-E-N-N-O-N-W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S. I currently serve as the Planning Director. As Mayor mentioned, this is a new approach, if you will, for the Problematic Properties Program, but it mirrors work that's been done by our Code Enforcement Division and continues to be done by our Code Enforcement Division. There has been a modification or a tweak to their approach for these properties over the last year. That's primarily due to COVID and the education efforts that our Code Enforcement Division engaged in with other city agencies as it relates to the pandemic, to public health orders, and all matters COVID. However, because we're easing back into some semblance of normalcy, Code Enforcement's focus again goes back to dealing with these types of properties. As the Mayor mentioned, this is a long process, and it's a long process intentionally. When we're talking about knocking down somebody's fourplex or somebody's house or apartment building, we want to give that property owner every opportunity to come forward, to work with the city, to work with code enforcement, to engage in those matters, some big, some small, that are necessary to get a property like this back into habitable or usable condition. Compliance is the ultimate goal. We don't want to have to be here talking about knocking down buildings, but we respect property rights, but also there's a responsibility that this property owner and other property owners like them have to the rest of the neighborhood. And the city's job in this venture is to make sure that those standards, that those responsibilities for those property owners are being met. As the Mayor mentioned, we've got a new website where we're going to advertise these properties. We've found that when we're engaged in enforcement, two things really matter. One is information and one is education, and those can be synonymous, but we make every effort from an enforcement standpoint to let a property owner know what the issue is and then what can be done to correct it. And only when we don't get any communication, any back and forth, any any due process, good faith efforts are not made, do we take a property like this through the council process to request approval to ultimately knock it down. Secondly, it's also important to reiterate, as the Mayor noted, that when we get to this stage of the game, we do have people that come out of the woodwork. We do have properties that are suddenly sold where we have worked for years to try and make that happen or assist in making that happen. While this may be slated for the wrecking ball, there's still an opportunity for somebody to step in with the experience and the ability to convert this back into a productive use. Lastly, as the Mayor mentioned, if you'll go to the Planning Department website, the Problematic Properties Program, the top 15 list is displayed there, and that's your best source of taking a look at the website and getting information from there. Mayor, back to you, sir.
Thanks so much, Brendan. And as we look around, there's obviously a long history with each property has its own story. And this one, I remember actually we did eventually take care of the house across the street. I remember there was, from door knocking, there was a hoarder who was living there, and then it caught on fire. And so you do see how we care about our neighborhoods and we care about these properties and how they bring down the area around them. But we also have to do it within the confines of the law. And so that's what this program is really designed to accelerate. So I think with that, we can take questions for folks. We have some other experts on specific issues if they're needed. So, Rick, you want to arrange folks, etc.?
Well, Angelo is the code enforcement. I think Nancy has a question.
Sure. Sure. So the Safe City Strike Force doesn't exist anymore. And as you know, there were some challenges and issues that came up with that. And so I believe the last administration actually ended that program. What we did when we came in under my administration is we started the ADAPT program, which is a version of that, but that is in compliance with the law. And so that is for criminal activity. So the ADAPT program runs in parallel to this, but it's still in effect and actually has been working quite well. So that's scoring with respect to calls to 911 and police call-outs and so forth. So the ADAPT program is a more legally appropriate version of Safe City Strike Force that is still up and running and working, and of course that's through the Fire Marshal's office. This is for code enforcement, so it's non-criminal violations, and so that's what this program is all about. Yes?
So you mentioned that there's like
Or Angela speak to that. And these guys, we changed it. When it hit 95, I said we don't have to wear suits anymore outside, but you must have missed the memo.
I didn't get the memo.
At least we're in the shade.
Yeah, there are various criterion that are used, but the top ones include the amount of city tax dollars that are paid out to contractors to board up, secure the property. These properties, it's not uncommon to have illegal dumping, so somebody will come by in the middle of the night, dump a pile of tires or a couch or that sort of thing. And so all of those actions, all of that work, relates to tax to a cost, which we use tax dollars to cover. But that's a big one. Calls for service from our emergency personnel, so either the police department or the fire department, are factored into that. This unit behind me here, just this weekend, had another fire. Our division manager had to respond at about 2 o'clock in the morning, I think it was. 3 o'clock in the morning. Is there a difference between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning when you're having to get out of bed? But all of those sorts of factors, crime in the area, many times these becomes a magnet for that. So we're working with the ADAPT program and partnering with them to make a determination as to where a particular property is going to rank on the list.
then just a quick follow-up. Is that list going to be added to extensively as it goes on? Is it a working list, or just for now you're starting with this top 15?
We'll start with those top 15, but it is a working list. So once a property is either brought into compliance or is demolished, it will come off the list, and there will be a property to replace it. One of the things that I neglected to mention when I was talking earlier is the website that we have set up has a success tab to it. So those are properties that have, again, either been brought into compliance or have been demolished, as our code enforcement division has been working on this for the past year or so.
You mentioned a 6-year process to demo a property like this. Can you quickly go through why it takes 6 years, and is there a time frame of
Yes. So at least 12 months has to be provided to a property owner that has a property like this. And that's a requirement not only under state statute, but under the Uniform Housing Code, the city ordinance that addresses these types of problems. Additionally, it's a back and forth process. We're trying to get in communication. We're trying to talk to somebody, on the phone, over email, in person, to explain to them, what the problem is and what can be done to correct it. And honestly, there are times where we make that initial outreach and we've got somebody that seemingly wants to work with us, and then months will go by, years will go by where we don't hear anything. There are also times where we have a property and maybe we have to board it up, but it remains in that condition, not ideal, but it does meet minimum safety standards. And then suddenly months later it becomes problematic. We get people breaking in, or we get fires, we get drug paraphernalia, complaints from neighbors, that sort of thing. So there's a back and forth to it, but again, we want to give a property owner every possible opportunity to step forward, rather than just simply saying, look, you've got a problematic property, we'll give you a number of weeks to correct it. You didn't correct it, we're going to knock it down. We intentionally want to give folks an opportunity to step forward and do the right thing.
Do you know how many vacant homes and businesses there are in Albuquerque and how many are considered nuisance properties right now?
Generally speaking, there are about 300 different residential properties, so that does not include, strip malls and that's, commercial sites, that sort of thing. But about 300 of those are in a condition where they're unlivable, they're substandard, and they've been that way for at least a year, which makes it ripe for, under the ordinance, it makes it possible for code enforcement to present those to council if they determine that that's what's necessary, if demolition is what's necessary in order to correct or to abate the issue.
You had mentioned to us a couple months ago that city and property inspectors were helping with the COVID enforcement efforts to potentially from this. Is there an update about how many people are now putting their attention on this?
Everybody. Roughly, we have about 12 to 15 folks that are tasked with working in the field. That's our primary responsibility. Code enforcement continued, even through the pandemic, continued to work on these sorts of properties. But the vast majority of our field personnel were tasked with COVID, education type responsibilities. Now that we're moving back to the way things used to be pre-pandemic, all of our field personnel, again, are focused on these types of properties, as well as the other city ordinances that they enforce.
This program was designed to improve neighborhood safety, but do you anticipate an economic development element to this program as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you've got a productive piece of property, that helps with your tax base, with your real estate base. Plus, if we've got a property that's repurposed and it's being used correctly, it improves the neighborhood. We see a reduction in crime and those sorts of things, which have an economic component to them.
Hi, sir. So I live across the street. I'm actually the one that tore down the old buildings and put up these. I'm going to ask a general question. I'll get with your folks on the specifics of this property. But so my understanding is you guys have gotten permission from the city council to tear it down based on the crime and everything else that's been happening here. But the owner still owns it, right? Because we've tried to purchase it from him. He's non-responsive. He still owns it at this point. When you tear it down, he'll still own the property, correct?
That's correct.
At what point in the process does the city actually try to take ownership?
So, because liens, municipal liens are placed against the property, the city always has the ability to foreclose on those liens and collect that. We find from an enforcement standpoint that typically a property a property in this condition many times will be sold. Sometimes it happens prior to the demo, sometimes it's afterwards, but as part of that real estate transaction, the liens have to be paid off that's what needs to be penciled out from a purchaser standpoint. They're on the hook for paying those if they wish to purchase the property, but the city doesn't own the property.
And just to follow up, your enforcement guys and specifically the police department have been great about this. They're always very helpful. We call very rarely because it's just a part of the neighborhood. But when we do call, they're out here immediately. When we don't call, but somebody else does, they're very willing to answer questions and help. So kudos to both groups for the work they've done here. So
Thank you. And that's an excellent point. Sometimes because the process takes a while, sometimes if neighbors or nearby residents don't see something happening, the building has just remained boarded for the past couple of weeks. It doesn't mean that there's not work, or I can guarantee that there's work going on behind the scenes. It's always appropriate to either reach out to code enforcement directly, contact 311, and we can get a status update and explain where we are in the process or what we're waiting on as part of what we do in code enforcement.
Take one more community question. I think the media has their questions, and then we can follow up with anyone.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd just be curious on the timelines moving forward in the event that the property owner does not respond to you guys, your actions so far.
Good question. Yes. So generally speaking, the owner has the ability to an appeal. That's about a 10-day period. If there's not an appeal, then code enforcement begins working to have asbestos testing done here. If that's found, then we work with the contractor to have that properly removed and disposed. And then a request goes out for contractors to submit a proposal to tell us how much they charge to demolish this. Once that process is completed, we work with the contractor. We don't have folks that are just waiting around to knock buildings down, and so sometimes we have to work with them based on their work schedule. But generally speaking, within 30 to 45 days, you'll see some sort of action take place as it relates to this property, barring an appeal or anything of that nature.